Hi, welcome. In this video, we're going to work on separate compilation in C++. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to launch Visual Studio, and I wanted to show you something you can do here. When I launch Visual Studio, I'm going to launch an old project that I was working on, Console Application 1. And actually, when I was working on this project, I was actually playing the guess game. So I was playing the guess game, and I was working on that. And so if I build this right now and run it, it's going to be my guess game. So anyway, I'm not going to sit here and play the game, but I just wanted to show you that I have a working guess game. But I'm going to use the same project to work on something else. So one thing that I can do is I can remove the guess game from this project. And it's not going to be deleted forever. I'm just removing it from my current working on this project. And I'm going to add different things to my project. So I kind of like to work with one project and just add and remove and do things so I don't have to always create new projects. And since this is my main function, or the application file, I'm going to rename it because right now it's not going to be program 11, but it's going to be the main. Eventually, this is going to be the main driver for my day of year. That's what I'm going to do now. Is I'm going to break day of year into a .h and a .cpp file. Some of you have emailed me about .hpp. .hpp. Some compilers require you to use .hpp to indicate that it's a C++ program instead of .h. It's just important that if you notice here, you have to make sure that you put the right name because it needs to know what to find. So we're going to stick with the classic and just use .h. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to open up my day of year program. This is a day of year class. It's all in one file. So I'm going to put that into my main here. And I'm going to make sure that it works. So this was a day of year class. It has, if we take a look at it up here, here's the explanation of the day of year class. It has it has a default constructor, an explicit value constructor, an input function, an output function, a set function, a get month function, a get day function, and it has one private member function and two private member variables. So let's make sure that this works, and then we're just going to break this day of year program into separate files. So we're just going to test it, enter the month for, the day is the 30th, enter your birthday, and it says the day, and it gives me feedback it's not my birthday. It's just a very simple program, and if you did follow along in Chapter 10, I do believe that this was the program that I used as the example in Chapter 10. When we started learning about classes. All right, so now and I also think we used this in Chapter 11 when we did our friend function, our equal. So let's break this up into separate files. So what I want to do is I want to take this definition of my class, which is the prototypes and where it describes my class, and I want to take that and I want to move that into a separate file. And then the implementation of my class, which is the member functions here, I want to move those in a separate file so that anyone could have an application and use my day of year class. So it's pretty simple to do that. So all I need to do is I go to Project, Add New Item, and I have a choice if it's an implementation file or a header file. So the first is going to be a header file. The name of my header file would be the name of my class, DayOfYear.h. And now that gets added to my project. And then this pragma once, all this is put here just to make sure that when you create a new class, if you're going to add that class, you can have as many classes as you want and as many libraries as you need when you're doing your application. So you do not want to have two classes that have the same name because that makes everything very confusing. But the thing that we're going to add in here anyway is when we make our, I already started the .h file for you. When we do our .h, we will put this up here. That checks to make sure there is not another class for this project defined called DayOfYear. So I'm going to go ahead and take that and put that into my .h file. So this is my header file for my DayOfYear class. So it's just saying that, oops, I have a typo here. It's just saying that I want to define a class called DayOfYear. I want to make sure that there is no class called DayOfYear, and this is the if there is not, then the definition will be done when I go to compile and build this. All right, so the other file I need to add to my project is I need to add a .cpp file. So I will say project, add new item. And I need to add a .cpp, so I want to call that DayOfYear.cpp. So now I have my DayOfYear, I have my main function here, and I have my DayOfYear class. So now I just want to break off my DayOfYear from my main function. And of course, if you were to be doing this from scratch, you have to start from scratch, but this is just showing you how to do separate compilation using a class that already exists. So I'm going to take all this, which is the definition of my class, and remove it from my main function and put it into the .h file. Now, if I'm not using anything in here, any extra libraries or anything to define this, I don't need to include anything. If I'm using strings or I'm using something that I need to include, then of course I would have to add pound includes and things like that. If I'm using cout, cin, anything that is needed, I would have to include it. But in this description, I'm using standard things, just integers, so I don't think I need to include anything extra. But what I do need to do is I need in here, this is my main function, of course, I need to include my DayOfYear class. So this is saying I need to include my DayOfYear so that my main function is able to find the DayOfYear class. And I don't know if I'm using cout and cin in my main function, but I'm assuming that I will be, so I will leave these here. Using namespace standard says, especially with string and input and output, I'm using the standard namespaces for those. All right, so the next thing, so here's my DayOfYear.h. So all I did is I took the prototypes and the definition, it's called the defining the member variables, the member functions of my class, and I took that and moved it into what's called a header file and moved that out of my main function. So now I'm going to take the implementation, which is the implementation of all of these functions, and move those. Of course, if I were to be starting from scratch, I would have to actually do the implementation, which we have already done for this class. So I'm just showing you how to separate the compilation. So that I will take those, which we've already done. I am going to include this in case any of those member functions have input or output or use strings. And these are all of my member functions. And I'm going to remove them from my main function here and move them into here. So I still need to include the name of the class, the scope resolution operator, the name of the function, the same way that I did all in line in one file. I've just taken it out and put this into a separate file. So here is my constructor for my class. It initialized the month and the day to 0. That's the default constructor. You can also use an explicit value constructor. and pass it the month and the day. This is the input. This is the function that gets the input from the user. This is a member function. This is public. And this is the member function that outputs. This is another member function that allows you to set the day in the month. And this function will use the check date function here. The check date function makes sure that the date that you're trying to set it to is a legal date. And these are my accessor functions that return the month and the date, because month and day are private member variables. So if anyone who used my class wanted to access my month or my day, they would have to use an accessor function to get those values. So now let's check my main function. So my main function, I have removed all of the preprocessor directives from my main functions. That's why I have these errors here. So I need to put them back. My main function is going to include IOStream, string, and day of year. My day of year function is going to include IOStream. There is input and output in here. I don't know if there's any strings. I don't even think that we need strings. So we actually could remove this. And I don't think we're using any strings in this function. Of course, you should have comments up here that describe what's going on in the program. This is not a really good style here, that I don't have a lot of comments, but I'm just trying to get right to the point of separate compilation. So here's my main function. I'm not sure if I use any strings in here either. So I think I could remove that as well. So here I'm declaring two objects of type day of the year. I could also have, here I could do a day of year and pass it, because I do have an explicit value constructor. So these right here would call the default constructor, and this would call the explicit value constructor. But that's in a whole nother video. This is only separate compilation. So now this is very nice, because I have this little driver function that tests and uses my day of year class. Oh, I did use an explicit value right here to do Independence Day. And I did it here for Christmas as well. Oh, I didn't get that far. Okay, that's fine. So I do have this little main function here that will test my day of year. And I will put these up on the not on final section on Canvas after I finish this. But it's very nice, because now I have this separate file in which I can go look and say, all right, if I wanted to use this class day of year, all I need to see, this is what an abstract data type, this is the whole point of it. I don't need to know how it's implemented. If I put good comments here and good descriptions, I can say, all right, I could use this day of year function, this day of year class, and use objects of type day of year. And this is what I could use. I could have two different types of constructors. I could do input, output. I could set the date. I could get the month. I could get the day. And actually, the private part is not even part that is important to those who use the class either. The private part is important to the person who implemented the class. And then I have, this is my implementation, which no one really needs to see that, because that's the whole idea of having a class, is you say, I've created this class. It does this with the day of the year. If you would like to use it, here's the header file. And you can see how nice it is to break your program into different sections and different files, and it makes everything much easier. So now I can build it. When I'm building it, there's a two-step process. The build is going to build the day of year class, and it's also going to build the main function. It's going to connect the main, and then it's going to link. It's going to link. So actually when I build, I can just compile, which will go through and compile the code and turn that into an object. And then the build step is going to link everything together so that it works. And the only way to start it executing is to have an application file or a main function, because the way C++ works is that it needs to have a place to start executing. So you can remove your main function from the project, which I'll do in a moment. I just wanted to test this. So let's test it. And it's working. Okay. Okay, it's working. Okay, so here, the reason we're not getting any feedback here on these is because we only get feedback if today was Christmas or if today was Independence Day. So let's test that really quick. So here, today is Independence Day is this month. So that's why it's not ignoring all of that. It's just not testing it unless our month matches the month of Christmas or the month of Independence Day. All right, so now I'm going to see what happens if I remove the main function. So I can remove the main function, and then I'm going to do some kind of error here, like that. And now I want to try to compile my class. So when I tried to compile my class, I have some errors here, which I made on purpose, so I cannot compile my class. So let's fix that, and let's try and compile my class again. So now my class has compiled. And now if I go to build and build a solution, I'm getting this unresolved externals. The reason I'm getting this is because I can't, when you have a class, you can compile your class and turn your class into an object, but you cannot build a running application if you don't have a file that has a main function in it. So that's why I'm getting this error. So I could go over here to my project, add existing item. I could bring my main function back, and then I would be able to build it and create a complete project. And I mean a complete application.